Hey, what's up everyone? Feeper here with another video for you. So in this one we're going to be taking a look at the Gunbreaker in PvP. We're going to be going over its kit, and then we're going to talk about things you should be looking out to do, things you should not be looking out not to do, if that makes any sense. So we'll kind of jump in here. Now first things first, you have your standard 3-hit combo: Keen Edge, Brutal Shell, and Solid Barrel. It works pretty much the same as it does in PvE. Solid Barrel will give you a cartridge, and Brutal Shell will give you the Brutal Shell shield, depending on how much damage you do. But it also heals you for the amount that you do as well. Now, also very similarly to how it works in PvE, Gnashing Fang is almost identical. The only difference that each of the continuation hits will heal you for the damage done, as you can see. The other neat thing about this is that it actually has a total potency of 8400, which, to put that in perspective, is 1600 potency off from melee limit break. It's got a 30-second cooldown, just like it does in PvE, so it's pretty strong for that amount of potency and for the amount of healing you get. So definitely be sure to abuse that. Now, of course, you can also use your cartridges on Fated Circle or Burst Strike. Then you have Lightning Shot, which is just a 600 potency range stun, for 2 seconds. And then you have a Gap Closer, just like you do in PvE with Rough Divide. Again, 600 potency, but it also gives you a cartridge and you have 2 stacks, so definitely keep that in mind as well. Now, probably the most unique part of the kit for Gunbreaker is Draw Injunction. So this is a 30-second cooldown, and depending on who you hit, it has a different effect. So you hit a melee DPS or a tank, it lowers the target's damage dealt by 10%, while giving you the buff Draw Power, which increases your damage dealt by 10%. And if you hit a healer or a ranged DPS, it increases their damage taken by 10%, and then you get Draw Fortitude, which makes you take 10% less damage. Now, these buffs also interact with Burst Strike and Fated Circle. So for Burst Strike and Fated Circle, it's the same for both of them. If you have Draw Power, which is the melee DPS and tank one, this also gets a bonus effect of having a bind for 2 seconds. So either a single target bind or an AoE bind. The Draw Injunction also has a really cool special effect with Burst Strike and Fated Circle. So depending on which of the buffs you have, these abilities that get an additional effect. So for Draw Power, which is the tank and melee DPS one, these abilities will also apply a 50% heavy or 50% slow for 4 seconds. So either in a single target or an AoE. And then if you have the Draw Fortitude, which is the healer range DPS one, it then gives you a 2-second bind either in an AoE or in a single target. That's definitely something you want to keep in mind. Being able to know which one to use at which time is very important. And another thing to keep in mind is that when you have this buff, it lasts for 10 seconds on you. But if you use either of these abilities, it then consumes the buff. You don't get to keep it. So you want to keep the buff for longer to try and do more damage or take less damage, and then use these at the end is a good idea. But if you want to just use this and try and get some CC out, that's also a valid option. So that's pretty much the general kit out of the way, and we're gonna switch over to some gameplay, and we're gonna start talking about how to be successful on the Gunbreaker. Not that it's very difficult right now. Oh, and just a quick edit here. I completely forgot to talk about this in my first take. Aurora, 30-second cooldown, 500 cure potency, hot, 15-second duration, and if you have the Brutal Shell buff on you, you also give your target the shield. So it's no secret right now that Gunbreaker is kind of overpowered in PvP. I expect to see it nerfed a decent amount potency-wise, and maybe a few other things with this kit coming in 5.1, but we could talk about that later. As for right now, the biggest strength of the Gunbreaker, besides its ridiculous damage output, is how flexible it can be. Not only do you have AoE CC, which is unbelievably good, you also have 2 forms of it. So you can just root people in place, or you can slow them for longer, whichever you think will be more beneficial in the moment. Generally speaking, if you can hit 2 people with Fated Circle, even if you're not going to be doing, say, as much damage to one person, the AoE CC is worth it unless you really need that extra CC to burst someone out, or in a lot of times if the healer is dead, say you kill the enemy healer, then it's probably okay to just use Burst Strike, because no one's gonna be getting healed, so it's not gonna be as big a deal. Another thing about Circle of Fate is that it can be tricky trying to line up the server ticks. Sometimes you'll use the ability and they'll get hit by the animation, but they won't actually get hit by the CC because they're actually in a different spot than where they are on your screen. So you just gotta kind of get used to that. Once you figure out sort of how that works with PvP, you'll have no problem. So besides the amount of CC and the AoE CC that you have, your next biggest strength, or I mean arguably your biggest strength, is just how much damage output you can do. If you full swing someone and then you get your whole Gnashing Fang combo off on them, they're gonna be hurting, man. I mean, you literally can 100-0 someone as a Gunbreaker and they try to kill you and you're just like, LOL, I'm healing. It doesn't matter. It's really, really strong. It's a little busted. I definitely think Gnashing Fang is gonna get hit, but as of right now, I mean, abuse it. Because it does a ton of damage. I mean, like, it almost does as much damage as a melee limit break, and it's got a 30-second cooldown, so go bananas. The other thing that Gunbreaker has over the other tanks is the fact that it has 2 stacks on its dash. I don't honestly think that this was meant to be in the game. I kind of think this is an oversight. The fact that you have 2 dashes and they give you 1 cartridge each is a little ridiculous. I think if it was one or the other, it'd be fine. If it was just 2 dashes that did damage, fine. Or if it was just one that gave you the cartridge, fine. But having both is a bit much. So again, I think this is one of the things. I think if they get rid of a dash or take away generating a cartridge, and they nerf the damage on Gnashing Fang, I think Gunbreaker will be in a much better spot and not be as overpowered. But who knows what they'll do? They might not do anything. I'm assuming they're gonna have to, because like ranks gonna be coming out, and I don't think they want to leave Gunbreaker the way it is, but we'll see. Now, even though Draw Injunction is great for AoE CC and it has a lot of functionality, just be careful to not use it the second it comes up. When that's on cooldown, you only have one other form CC. It's only Lightning Shot, which is good, but it's not like Paladin where you can cover someone and then hollow yourself. And that's kind of like a form of CC, quote unquote, because you're protecting them. It's not actually CC, but you get the idea. You're peeling for someone with that, and then you have 2 stuns on top of it, and you're reducing people's damage in AoE. Or Dark Knight that has the shield and the stun can reset, or Warrior that just has a ridiculously low cooldown stun and a ton of damage. If you use Lightning Shot and then you just use Draw Injunction just to try and get a kill, like to root someone and get a kill, you might find yourself in a weird spot for the next 25 seconds, and you're like, well, I don't really have any CC, and they're rushing my healer, so I guess I'll Gnashing Fang and hope they run away. But just keep that in mind. You don't have a lot of easily accessible CC. You kind of have to set up for it. Even though it's really good CC, just try to plan ahead. Another thing that will set you apart from other Gunbreakers is if you can make sure that whenever you Aurora, you also have the Brutal Shell buff on you. Now, obviously, it's not something that, like, this should be the main focus of your gameplay, and if you can't do it, it's fine. But if you can keep an eye on it and apply that shield along with the hot, it's going to be much stronger. And also, apply the hot earlier than you think you do, because first you have to wait for the server tick to happen for them to even get the heal. And second of all, it's a heal over time, so you can't use it reactively when someone's getting dove and be like, oh shit, they're getting dove, oh my god, you just throw the hot on them, they'll probably die. It's not like the Blackest Night where it has an immediate effect. So just try to, if you see someone getting close to like half and 2 people are on them, that's when you want to use it. Start helping them heal up, sooner rather than later. So you kind of have to be very proactive with a lot of the Gunbreaker's kit. Now, in terms of roll actions, Full Swing is a no-brainer. I mean, if you Draw Injunction someone and Full Swing, that's 20% extra damage, and if you can get part of your Gnashing Fang combo underneath that, I mean, they're gonna die. Like, they're just going to die. Or their healer is gonna use literally everything to keep them alive. So Full Swing, I think, is kind of a must on Gunbreaker. I mean, Like it's just so good not to have it. Now I like to also run Reprisal, which I've been saying in pretty much all my videos. Even though you already have a 10% damage reduction, it's only for tanks and melee DPS. So I like to have an extra one for, you know, something like a summoner or a black mage. But if you want more CC, that's cool. I think Interject is actually pretty strong on Gunbreaker. I think out of all the tanks, Gunbreaker is the one I would use Interject on the most. Low Blow it's fine if you're gonna like kick away the tank and stuff, but just displacing people a lot on Gunbreaker just doesn't really work as well, because so much of your damage is off GCD dependent that you don't want them to go flying away from you, and then you know it doesn't really work as well. So I think Interject's a bit better if you want to go more of a CC route, but Low Blow is still fine. And then of course Rampart is just, you know, bleh. Now in terms of how you actually play the job, I find I like to play the job a bit more support type, but don't be afraid to sort of maybe abandon your team a bit and try and just like 1v1 or just burst out their ranged DPS for a second so their healer has to heal them. You know, if you can Gnashing Fang their ranged DPS because they're really squishy, their healer has to turn and heal them, and then, you know, rough divide back into their melee DPS that's on your healer or something, and then draw Injunction them and slow them. That's really strong. You know, you have a lot of mobility, more mobility than the rest of the tank, so use that to your advantage. So like I said, you can solo people with your insane damage. You have great AoE CC, you just kind of have to plan for it and be proactive. Aurora is a good ability. It's definitely the weakest out of the, I guess the 4 like single target buffs that the tanks have. You know, Blackest Night is obviously just super good. I think Cover is a bit better because it has more, you know, functionality, and I think Nascent Flash is also better because it gives you just flat mitigation on top of healing, and this is just healing, but maybe a shield if you use it right. So I think it's the worst, but for what the rest of the Gunbreaker brings to the table, I think it more than makes up for it. And that's going to be a wrap for the Gunbreaker. It's not a whole lot to talk about. Draw Injunction's probably the biggest, like, I guess, skill ceiling type thing to really use to know which one is better to use in which situation, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Just Gnashing Fang people to death, and you're good to go. That's pretty much it. Now, if you guys like this video, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and drop me a like. I really appreciate it. You can also watch me stream live over at twitch.tv/feeper7. I play a lot of Final Fantasy. I stream all of my raid content and my PvP content over there. That's where I get the footage for these videos. And I also do a bunch of WoW Classic and some other sort of odd games in the mix as well. Next video in this series will definitely be about Warrior because it's the only one left. And then after that, I got a little surprise, something cool I think that you guys will like. So be on the lookout for that. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.